Hello everyone, welcome to the bonus material for my interview with Nat about the UK and Romania. You know the drill by now. These are some bits we didn't manage to fit into the main interview and some particularly unusual topics covered in this one. Enjoy!
Dung beetles. I'm very
Okay,
interested in dung beetles.
yeah,
When you put, there are chemicals called porons that you pour down the spine of the back, down the back of the cow
right,
to take parasites away. They solve everything. They keep flies off.
mm-hmm.
They prevent lungworm and gutworm and liver
Yeah,
flukes. They protect the animal from all of these things. So-called protection. It's an awful euphemism, protection.
yes,
Often it's used for destruction as well. But if you pour these ivermectins on a cow, they will pass it on in their dung and they will poison the soil.
yes,
And you can see perhaps as one of your school projects, you could go out scraping up cowpats, dissolving them, and looking at the population of dung beetles. But it's very
I'll
interesting.
I'll put that to the A-level students and see what they say. If we've got any interest in that, then yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose once they've been at home so long, once they're back in school, they'll probably be up for any sort of practical.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go and scrape some cowpats.
But it is amazing. The dung beetles are often pulling the dung into the soil. They're
Yeah,
directly introducing this carbon into the soil, and they're helping to break down the cowpats as well.
right.
And so that's one. It sounds small, but actually it's quite a significant benefit of reducing pesticides.
So
And
how would
yeah,
you replace that pesticide? I mean, I think I've read somewhere that if you've got a more diverse pasture, that some of the wildflowers actually have a preventative effect in terms
yes,
of parasites and the overall cattle health. Is that the case, or
yes,
is that
it is absolutely. There are natural. Uh, don't ask me why. They're called anthelmintics.
okay?
The, because a helminth is a worm, so an
Yeah,
anthelmintic
yeah.
is an anti-worm thing, and herbs do have these kind of effects, so they will remove worms, and also not overstocking. So if you rotate cattle fairly regularly from
Yeah.
one pasture to another, they will be eating less infected soils. And
Mhm.
also, if you're not overstocking, the animals are healthier, less stressed, and actually they can live with a lot of these things
Hmm.
and they won't let the infections get on top of them.
Another use for
And
social distancing there.
yeah. But we have managed to double or triple the income of these farmers.
Wow.
And one way is a lot of it is milk. They produce milk, and we've worked with the farmers to improve the hygiene of the milk. It's very important when you
Okay.
milk a cow, and you're going to tell me this is applied biochemistry too. But when you milk a cow, you've got to cool the milk pretty quick. I mean, first of all, you've got to clean the teats off and make sure that the container you put the milk into
Yep.
is clean. But once you've done that, you've got to cool it very quickly because there are always a few bacteria in the milk. And if it stays warm for more than, say, 10 minutes or so, that number of bacteria will start to grow. So we have trained them to do clean milking, but also we've given them cooling tanks to take the milk to. And we've helped to negotiate with the milk processors
Yes.
uh, and said, look, the ADEPT villages are producing high quality milk and we can guarantee it. So we want a better contract, and we've got them twice the price per litre compared with
Wow.
neighbouring villages. So that's quite an impact.
That's brilliant.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then alternative economic uses of the countryside are important too, because as an example, uh, we've developed a mountain bike trail which brings thousands of people into the area every year
Yeah.
and brings at least €100,000 income into the general area just because we built a mountain bike trail. And another thing I should mention is food supply chains. Generally, farmers are producing small amounts of very high quality food, and then they're absolutely useless at getting it to the market. And
Right.
we've
Okay.
encouraged them to work together as associations.
Yes.
They can pool their products and create either box schemes, which are becoming more and more popular in Romania, particularly after COVID. The demand for box schemes in our area has doubled, but also just getting to markets as well. And these associations are able to buy a cool van if they need it,
yeah.
a means of getting their stuff to the local town to sell, and they are suddenly able to sell their food at a reasonable price rather than just swap it between them and throw it away or whatever they were doing before. It's very good data because it's managed by university professors or senior teachers who go over there, so that the students who go over, they're doing something useful, but also their data is checked as it goes along as well.
Mm.
So there we've got repeated monitoring, giving strong data, and we can link that back also to land use, because we also interview the farmers about how they're managing the land, when they mowed it, if they changed it from mowing to grazing, that kind of thing, so that ideally we can relate the fluctuations in the numbers, presence and numbers of different species with changes in land management. And that's really strong as well, because that helps us make policy. And if we take that to the next stage, once you've got those kind of data, I really like using data as a plural. I don't know whether you insist on that, but
it's fine. I'm sure the students would debate it. Common usage, absolutely fine.
Yes. Anyway, using those kind of data, you can then go to policymakers and say, we think you've got to do this to improve land management. And I'd like just to mention some pitfalls of agri-environment schemes. There are a lot of schemes coming from Europe, but they will be coming from the UK, that are called agri-environment schemes, and they're paid for farmers to manage land beyond their duties of good management. If they do anything beyond those, they're paid a certain amount per hectare to do certain things. And those certain things may be not mowing a meadow before the 1st of July.
Right.
Or when you mow it from the inside to the out, and it's particularly to do with mowing, I would say, and field margins. There's another example of an agri-environment scheme that you're paid for. A grassy field margin, a herb flower-rich field margin around a ploughed field. Mm-hmm. But looking at grassland, which I know more about, there are certain dangers in these things which are called prescriptive agri-environment schemes. They tell farmers when they can do things based on their model of what species like. Right. And we've been working in Romania on a different model. We were funded by the EU actually to develop a different model, which has been tried also in the UK and in Ireland, which are called results-based agri-environment schemes. So there, what you do is you go to a farmer and say, you've got these flower or butterfly species on your land. We're going to come next year and check if you've still got them. And we will pay you if you still have.
Fantastic.
And it's up to you how you manage your land. But if you don't have them next year, we'll probably take away the payment you got in the first year as well. So
fine.
Farmers are under quite a strong motivation to manage their land well. But the important thing about being a farmer is that the ideal time to mow isn't fixed in Brussels or London as the 1st of July, because it could be a week earlier in a dry year, a week later in a wet year. It might be a week earlier on a sunny spot and a week later on a shady spot. And only farmers with the ability to micromanage their land can make those decisions. And so these results-based schemes are very, very powerful, and I think they're going to become more important as well. And the way we do that, just to go back to your original question, is we did, under this project, we developed a list of 30 flower species, which are relatively easy to recognize, and we're calling these indicator species.
Yes.
And these are the ones that are used to test whether the farmers are meeting the requirements or not. So all you're doing is using this list of 20 species, once again doing a transect, and if you've got more than a certain number of species, if you want the details, it's a 100-meter transect divided into 3, and each of those 3 33-meter sections is counted differently, and you need to have a certain number of species in each of those 3 sections in order to meet your criteria. And then we have different levels, 5, 8, and 12. And if you've got 5 or above, 8 or above, and 12 or above, you get different levels of payment. And that has been very popular with farmers because they can see, they have the freedom to react to different seasons, but they can also see the results of what they're doing as well, rather than just being told what to do by a bureaucrat.
I mean, you've kind of alluded to this in your last answer, but as a beef producer, to what extent do you think, people sort of going vegetarian and vegan and all that kind of stuff, is that helpful in combating climate change and loss of biodiversity? And in terms of meat consumption, you've mentioned eating less meat, which I personally agree with. I'm not a vegetarian, but I do agree with eating less and better. I say that in lessons all the time. But is there a place for meat production in an expanding population world, and if so, how?
Yes, yeah. One of the arguments that the livestock producers make is a lot of the world and a lot of England is only suitable for grass anyway.
Yes.
It's too hilly to plough up. The soil is not right for ploughing. That's one argument. It's only a very partial argument to me. The other thing is, every time you plough, you release a fantastic amount of carbon into the air because there's a reaction with the soil that's been turned over. And within 6 months, you have released, I won't try figures, I could send them to you later if you like, but within 6 months, you've released a great burst of carbon. And another point is the pasture-fed livestock guys talk about green carbon and black carbon. Green carbon, including methane, which is what? CH4, is it? So carbon. Yeah. Green carbon has been with us for a long time, circulating around. And if you think of the number of herbivores in the world now, compared with what there were 1,000 years ago, or 100 years ago, it hasn't changed dramatically, and it might even have gone down. Methane has a 10-year half-life.
Yeah.
And so, looking at it in a slightly longer picture, if the number of herbivores is not going up, actually the amount of global warming gases is not going up either, because the methane will be produced. A certain amount is recirculated into the ground anyway by the grass growing, but what goes up into the atmosphere is going to deteriorate fairly quickly anyway. And so the methane footprint of cattle, so long as the number of global cattle or UK cattle doesn't go up, the carbon footprint isn't going up either.
Yeah.
Whereas actually keeping grasses going by what else would you do with the grass? You'd let it become forest, or you would plough it up and produce vegetables or wheat. And the forest is a possibility, though forest also produces methane as well. And grassland actually sequestrates carbon at a rate not dissimilar from forest because of the roots of the grass growing all the time. So the difference from a carbon footprint of grassland and forest is not that enormous. And the moment you plough it, or if you're importing avocados from, if you're a vegetarian and liking imported vegetables, your actual effective carbon footprint is very high as well.
Yes, that was going to be my next question. Is what in terms of what you'd prefer? I mean, is an imported soya bean better or worse than a British piece of beef?
Yes, exactly. And I think that we've got to do proper auditing of how we produce our meat, because if you're producing your meat just from grass locally, it's got a much lower footprint than if you're buying in soya to cram your animals in a feedlot.
Yeah.
And some of your students might say they did a study of the footprint. I need to refer to something here that the UN, so the FAO did a study of life cycle emissions of greenhouse gases, and they looked at transport and they looked at cattle, and unfortunately they didn't compare like with like, and so the story got out that actually farm livestock is as bad as or worse than global transport for reducing greenhouse gases. But actually it's not true. If you compare like with like, it's now 5% from livestock and 14% from transport.
Right.
And I believe even that livestock thing, I mentioned green and black carbon. And black carbon, the pasture-fed farmers talk about, is basically extracted coal and oil. That is the thing that is really changing the balance in the atmosphere, because that's what has changed. It's not the amount of methane being emitted by cows that's changed, which incidentally is enteric methane. Don't let them say that our cows are farting the methane. Most of it is belched out by the enteron, by the digestive process happening in the rumen of the animal. So it's enteric methane. But the big danger, the big game changer in global warming is fossil fuels, the increased extraction of fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are used, of course, by everyone for transport, but also a lot in agriculture for producing artificial fertilizers and for driving around your farm, putting those fertilizers onto the farm. So I think we must really focus on fossil fuels as a danger and not on livestock.
As a sort of little aside on this, talking of methane coming orally from cows, I read something again, this is a little off script, I read something again recently about if we supplement cattle diets with certain types of seaweed, that has a massive reductive effect on the amount of methane they produce. Is that something you've had any knowledge or experience of? Or?
I haven't tried it myself, and actually seaweed and such things have very beneficial other effects on cattle as well. So I've got nothing against it. The only thing that I hesitate about is that I feel it's buying into this argument that methane is the enemy, whereas I feel methane from cattle is pretty stable and it hasn't changed anything. But I quite agree. Why not do that as well to reduce the impact even more?
Yeah. So
I haven't tried it myself.
Yeah. So to summarise, obviously methane's a more powerful greenhouse gas, but it dissipates more quickly, and obviously it's not extra that we're adding to the environment if we keep the cattle the same in the UK. What would you say about other systems in other parts of the world where they are increasing their wealth and they are eating more livestock and the amount of livestock is increasing? And in different systems, I'm thinking increased wealth in China, that kind of stuff. Do you have any knowledge of their cattle production systems and what's going on there?
Only that they're very and interestingly enough, rice paddies are quite strong methane
Heavy
emitters
methane,
as well. Yeah. But anyway, if they move from rice to beef as they are, or to dairy products, they are very dependent on soya, imported soya, and that's the big danger, I think.
Yeah.
And the worst aspect, although I accept that climate change is happening, I think the loss of habitat is a much bigger driver, direct driver of climate change than many people think of. So loss of habitat is including grasslands and including forests as well, of course, is actually not a consequence of climate change, but it's actually a very strong driver of climate change. And sometimes I regret that certain alternative energy products, alternative energy projects like wind turbines or hydroelectric plants, this kind of thing, are actually destructive of biodiversity. And I think we should try to make green energy more habitat friendly. If you build a line of turbines across the top of a mountain, it can be very destructive with building roads, putting a lot of cement in and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So
but I do feel that the soya, the loss, the deforestation, particularly in Latin America, and growing of soya there is one of the worst things that's happening in the whole world for climate change.
Well, there you have it. Cowpat practicals and sinister soybeans. So next up we've got the cloud forests of South America visiting Ecuador, with thanks to Operation Wallacea and Tim Coles for the initial introduction to Nat. I'll see you next time.